In this week's video I'm sharing ideas for a spread, filling this glorious sketchbook with a page that you can do too. These are spreads for the last few months and I'm doing February today, using this rose that I painted last week and journaling here on the right. I'll take you through it all step by step so that you can adapt it for yourself, and I have some gorgeous new supplies to share, so we'll have lots of fun with these. And if you love journals and paint and playing around with paper, then hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. I have lots more fun and creative ideas to share. I'm adding a little bit of glamour today. I'm going to use this new set of sparkly paints. They have mica in them. I got them from Jackson's Art online and they cost about £25. I'm using 3 shades of paint for the background today. You could use paint or anything you have in your collection. I have watercolour here and a couple of tubes of gouache in a gentle pink there that tones with the petals of the rose. I'm going to write on the right hand side and we're going to do a little bit of poetry as well later, so stick around for that. I'm bringing some little doodles into the design of the spread today. I did this just a few weeks ago. It was a relaxing, happy spread and you seem to enjoy it, so I'll leave a link to that in the description box down below. I'm using a water brush pen as I often do, and I've cleaned my palette. You can see it's clean. My tip, should you have a palette on which you leave acrylic paint as I did last week, is to soak it in biological washing powder. And I don't know if any of you have done that or you have some better recommendations for cleaning your palette. Let me know in a comment down below. But just keeping it real, here today I've used biological washing powder and it came out stunningly, beautifully white. I'm bringing some of those fine-tech colour roll paints onto the palette. They're heavily laced with mica but not a lot of pigment, at least the pale one that I'm choosing there doesn't. And this will just help me get something a little bit glistening, a little bit sparkly in the background. I normally swoosh on the page with watercolour to really break the page and take away the white, but today what I want to do is emulate what it would look like if we were layering paper. I'm using the paint more like a mat to help the eye focus on the rose. This sketchbook that I'm filling with my monthly spreads is from Arteza. It's acid free, it's fairly heavyweight paper. It's 5.1 inches by 8.3, which is 13 centimetres by 21, and that seems to work pretty well for the type of spreads that I'm really enjoying doing at the moment. I'll put a link to all of these supplies in the description box down below, and I'll add a link to a playlist which has quite a few other videos that I've done with art and junkie journal spreads that you might like to look at, so check that out in the description box. I'm adding paint to the page very gently, choosing each of these 3 colours so that they don't completely merge and blend. They have a distinct colour on the page. You can see here the metallic gouache that I've chosen. I've used the pale green and rose from that set of 12 and they're really fun to use and very easy. So they blend beautifully with the latte from the watercolour set that I've shared on my channel before. And this little gentle green you can see is very sympathetic to the green of the leaves in the rose. So it's a matte that will work very well behind that feature when we stick it on the page. I'm just drying off the page. You can see the teardrop mountain scene I painted a few weeks ago for the January spread. That was a lot of fun. And now it's time to add the feature, which is this focal point, this rose, and I painted this and sewed that little pocket last week, so you can see how I made it. It's incredibly easy, just a little bit of texture on this vintage book page and a small flower painted with, in this occasion, acrylic paint. Incredibly easy. Check out the video and have a go, and you could paint any flower you like. You can glue the paper on, you don't need a sewing machine either. So I'm going to attach that focal point on the left hand side, and I'm using a dry glue. I do have a choice of a wetter glue and I often use this wood adhesive, but because the paper is delicate I do need to be quite careful and I don't want it to be a bit lumpy or not stick nicely, so I'm using my Pritt stick and I'm positioning it intentionally so that I have a little bit of border around the top and the bottom, here and here, and an equal amount on the left hand side. And this means that I can do a pretty little border to the whole of the spread, both the right hand side and the left, which will really frame our page and allow us to have something that's pulled together. So I'm choosing a pen. I have a couple of pens that I often use, so 2 from this lovely set of gel pens. So I often use the black and the dark green from this set, although there's a very large range of colours, as you can see here. And I'm going to add a border, as I often do. I was hunting for an example to show you of the doodle border that I'm going to use, and as I flick through this journal, it's getting a bit full. I wonder, is this something you'd like me to do a page turn of, maybe of 2 or 3 of my full journals now, just to maybe have a bit of reflection on what we've done? So I'm adding the border. It's a wiggly line, super easy. I mean, how hard could that be? Make sure it's not straight. The intention is that it has a bit of that characteristic wiggle. And when we add a second line, we're just weaving in and out with a black pen, getting a little bit of regularity in the size of those gaps that we create. So we're going to do some colouring in. So when you've got your border of 2 lines, of intermingled lines, I just take a black pen, any black pen, and I'm just colouring in some small black blocks. Working my way round, very easy, very relaxing. You could do it in any colour, and if your spread has got some different colours on the pages, then maybe you want to choose a colour other than black. So perhaps a dark green would work really well if you're doing a botanical spread of some form. I really enjoy bringing poetry and pleasant words, pleasant script into my journal spreads, and you may have seen a few of these on previous spreads that I've shared on my channel. So today I've got just a few beautiful words that I found. I was just Googling, looking around for something pleasant as we approach spring, something calming, and I found some words from Edmund Spenser, who's a poet from the 1500s here in England, and his words are, "Calm was the day, and through the trembling air." And I'm not sure what it means. I maybe need to do a bit of work to research that, but it just felt like words of beauty. And I really enjoy just putting script on a page. I think it adds something to a spread. So I've chosen some gentle green paper here, and that will fit on the right hand side. And for a spread, as you're putting it together, one of the tips I have is to think about balance on the page. So I like to have maybe one primary focal point that we don't compete with when we put the picture together, but perhaps complement by not having all of the eye contact going to one side of the page. So as I attach that on the right hand side, I'm also going to bring it together. There's a little bit of repetition, happy repetition for the eye in the form of a border, and the faux stitching that I'm adding is sympathetic to the size of that little piece of paper. So it's really small stitches that I've added there on that little 3x4 piece of scrapbook paper. I'm pulling on a few ideas from previous journals, and slightly embarrassingly I'm sharing some of my older work, but hey, we're all friends here on the channel, aren't we? I'm going to add some dates for the month of February, and these will go on the left hand side as a column just down alongside that rose. And the idea here is that it's just a reference point, something to use as we work out what we're doing during a month. My tip is to sit back and look before you start about the amount of space you've got. I don't have lines on this art book page, so I'm being rather careful about the spacing so that I fit on all of those numbers. Where else do you get your inspiration from for your art and your journal spreads, for your Plan With Me pages? I like to watch Helen Colebrook, who is here in the UK, and she does fantastic Journal With Me spreads. And I also watch Creation CC, so CC has been brilliant at offering us super doodle ideas like these. So I'm just going to use a few concepts that I practiced a few weeks ago on this page. I'm mixing a little bit more of the mica paint in, and I'm going to put 3 little boxes down on the right hand side of the spread, and these will be massive bullet point markers for 3 little comments that I want to share, 3 little thoughts for the month of February that I'm just capturing here on the page. I'm going to journal horizontally across the page at the top and also vertically, and this will give some variety for the eye and also make best use of the page and the paper. So I'm taking the paint in a relatively watered down format and just colouring in those blocks. They're not necessarily the same size, but they are quite pale, and being pale will allow us to write on top of those paint blocks when they're dry, or colour in a little image that works for us. Whatever image you feel like drawing, you can add to each of those boxes. And yes, I have managed to get a little splot of paint on the page, just keeping it real. I'm adding a little bit more emphasis to our poetry from Spencer, to that little poetry mat, and I'm adding a second line of faux stitching, and this time the stitches, the individual little marks of black, are just a little bit longer than the ones that are on the green paper, and it just seems to work to add that sense of 3D. Moving on to the first of the blocks of paint, sympathetic to the month of February, but perhaps not too overly romantic. I'm adding a small heart here with a double border, and the border then is, I think, tuning into the whimsical border that we added at the beginning, bounding that again by little faux stitches, and as you can see, a small image, really tiny faux stitches, in fact almost little dots. And the 3 points that I'm journaling about today really fall under one heading, which I talk about a lot on my channel here. It's that what we create, the fun that we have when we play with paper and paint, is about the process and not necessarily the goal or the outcome. So I've just added a few of those words above the word February, and I'm just going to grab 3 things that I think are important, which help us enjoy our process of playing with paper and paint and of journaling and writing. 3 things that are personal to me that I just want to share, which hopefully will help you get more out of your time at your craft desk. My first point here is self-care. So the process of providing positive feedback to yourself, about yourself, maybe about a junk journal you've made or a spread that you've created, and for yourself. So giving yourself that feedback loop that just ticks a box and makes you feel good. I'm adding a little botanical doodle here to that second journaling box, and the second point that I'm making here is all about creative experimentation, and by that I mean relishing the process of trying without worrying about what comes out at the end, without worrying about the outcome. And so much of what we do here on this channel is really about playing. I describe myself as a beginner because I am, and I'm not worried about reaching that next level of expertise or skill, because I don't want to hold that as a challenge in front of me and create a greater sense of gap. And who needs that sense of fear of failure? Why don't we just look at the toys on our desk, sit in our craft seat, play with what we have, and just simply enjoy the process and the time that we have? And that's all I was getting at in that second point. It would be lovely to know if this makes some sense, or if these points and journaling words resonate with you. So do drop me a comment down below and share your thoughts about how you think about using your time when you're crafting, when you're journaling, or when you're filling an art journal spread. I've filled in the third doodle box with some wiggly lines and some dots, so really easy to do. And I guess that's really what my third point is all about: simplification. Using each day to reduce, reuse, maybe being gentle to the planet, and declutter. and I am on a bit of a use up scrap process at the moment, so stick around to the end and I'll show you what I've been doing, which really does use up quite a lot of our scraps and our ephemera. I can't resist using this vintage gold mica paint in the palette, so I'm going to rebalance the right hand side a little bit and add some colour to the centre of the heart. So going over the top of that beige mat that we created behind with just a little bit of that gold colour, and then within the centre of that, without going right to the edges, I'm picking out this beautiful warm sparkly rose. So a deeper colour than the vintage antique gold that I put down just before. I'm adding that, but I've not gone quite to the edge of the doodle border of the heart. The rattlebush doodle at the bottom of the page is also getting a little bit of warmth, so I'm filling in the leaves with some of that lovely rose colour as well, and I'm just emphasising some of the dots in the wiggly line doodle. So all three of those boxes have got something that pulls them together but not too much colour. A bit of improvisation. I don't have stickers, so I'm just drawing some dots and also filling them in with the same rose mica paint. If you've enjoyed this video and you love writing on paper and playing with journals, then hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. And if you do love playing with paper and using up scraps, then come back next week when I'll be making these file folders, a really easy project and an enormous amount of fun. I'll see you next week.